So you might have seen our previous video where I go hands-on with the Switch 2 and I was lucky enough to play with it for about 6 to 7 hours, and while albeit it is a great upgrade pretty much in every way, from the new Joy-Cons, the new display, the new docking situation, and the hype is warranted, but the reality is that the Switch OLED is actually not as big of a difference as you might think. And I'm gonna lay this out for you. So to start off, I want to give everybody some context by talking about the price points of each of these Switches, and we're going to be talking about US-based pricing because I know all that's kind of fluid right now, but when it comes to the latest Switch OLED that you can buy today, it's going to come with Super Mario Bros. Wonder bundled in there, as well as a 3-month subscription to Nintendo Switch Online, and that is $349 retail. You can always go cheaper by getting a renewed one or a used one from a third party, but we're going to stick to the retail pricing. And then for the bundled Mario Kart Switch 2, that's going to be $499 from all the major retailers, and that's not including any of the memberships that you have to come with it. So that is going to be a $150 price difference, so do keep that in the back of your mind as we run down the list of all the differences between the two. So what are you getting with the Switch 2 and with that $150 upgrade? So of course, you're going to be getting the larger 7.9-inch display compared to the 7-inch display that's going to be on the Switch OLED. But I would argue that if you're coming from the original Switch and you're upgrading to a Switch OLED, that screen size upgrade as well as the OLED tech is a huge upgrade overall. I came from an OG Switch and I recently got the Switch OLED and I saw a night and day difference from a brightness standpoint, a color standpoint. The size is a little bit bigger, which is nicer overall, but still not too big where it becomes cumbersome. And while it still is a 720p display on the Switch OLED versus the 1080p display on the Switch 2, I would argue that if you are using it in handheld mode, that resolution doesn't matter nearly as much as if you're using it on a larger display, which we'll touch on in a little bit when we're talking about the docked Switch experience. But one thing that is nice about the Switch 2, which is going to be great for more hardcore gamers, not really like myself who's a casual gamer, is going to be the 120 FPS refresh rate on the brand new Switch 2 versus the 60 FPS that we have on the regular Switch 1 OLED. Now again, this is going to be great for shooting games, for quick twitch games, but if you're just a casual gamer who plays things like Animal Crossing, people that play something like Pokemon like myself, then the 60 Hz is going to be more than enough because I'm not relying on anything quick to happen in order to progress in the game. Now, if you're playing Metroid or if you're a Fortnite player, or if you have a game that does support 120 FPS, then it is going to be relatively beneficial to have that in handheld mode. But again, for the casual gamer and for most people that will be using a Switch moving forward, I think 60 Hz is going to be more than enough. And then with the Switch OLED for the $350, you do get 64 gigs of internal storage with the ability to use regular micro SD cards, so you don't have to spend additional money to get the micro SD express cards, because those are going to be a little bit more expensive, and the express cards will be the only external form of memory that will work on the Switch 2. If you put in a regular micro SD card, it will read the SD card, but you will not be able to have save game data or use that save game data on your Switch 2, which is very unfortunate. So definitely keep that in mind that storage will be cheaper to use on the Switch 1. But the Switch 2 does come with 256 gigs of onboard storage by default, which is 4x the amount of the Switch OLED, so that does take into consideration that price jump and that price increase, but just know that the games on the Switch 2 are also much bigger than the games on the Switch 1, so it's probably going to net out and even out overall if you are downloading Switch 2 games on the Switch 2 and then regular Switch 1 games on the Switch 1. So I do think that even though on paper the Switch 2 has more storage, I think it's a wash overall, and the Switch 2 is going to be more expensive to maintain from a storage standpoint. And then to circle back to the display, the Switch 2 is using an LCD display. Now I do think there's going to be a Switch 2 OLED down the line, maybe a year, 2 or 3 from now, as they revamp it to kind of resell it to everybody. But again, I'm going to continue to argue that OLED is still better than LCD, even if you're giving up resolution, because everything is just crisper, it's more saturated, it's brighter, and you also get those deep blacks that you will not get from an LCD display on the Switch 2. So what about internals? What about the computer? What about the specs? Now, Nintendo is very similar to Apple in that they don't really release all the specs that are inside of the chip in the computer that it's using because they figure that that doesn't really matter to the overall experience. Nintendo's always focused on making the best and the most fun experience, and they don't really use specs as a stranglehold or a way to kind of push themselves forward because they know that Xboxes and PlayStations and the computers of the world will have more on paper. It's just what you do with it overall. So to compare, you will be getting a much faster computer overall on the Switch 2, and again, you should because the Switch 1 internals are about 8 years old now at this point. The Switch 1 does have 4 gigs of internal RAM of DDR4 RAM, Well, it's using the NVIDIA X1 Integra chip, which has been more than enough, especially for me as a casual gamer, and even when I play a little bit more, like I'm playing NBA 2K, I'm playing Fortnite, I'm playing shooting games, and for the most part it handles everything loads fine. I play Mario Kart with 4 different people, it works great in the dock position, so I've never really had a complaint when it comes to something slowing down. The only time that it's kind of slowed down on me a little bit, and that could just be the Wi-Fi in my house, although I don't think it is when I use Nintendo Switch Online. It does kind of stagnate a little bit, it takes a little while to load, and that's something that is a little bit annoying, but even with the Switch 2, they didn't let us leave the games that we were playing, so we couldn't go to the home screen, we couldn't go to the Nintendo Switch Online, and we couldn't experience what that's going to be like. So, I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be faster, it just remains yet to be seen exactly how much faster it's going to be. But internally on the Switch 2, it has been leaked that we are getting 12 gigs of internal RAM, of DDR5 RAM, and we're using an NVIDIA processor with AI-powered features that was custom made for the Switch 2. So again, the internal spec will be better, and it should be better. It just remains yet to be seen how much better on a day-to-day and from a physical use case it's going to be for the end user. But I'm sure it will help out for these higher, more intense games like the Hogwarts Legacies of the world, the Metroids of the world, and I think it'll run a little bit smoother and there'll be less restriction overall for game developers because it will be a better overall experience, but those games still exist on the regular Switch 1 and they still work plenty fine, and you get, again, 95 to 98% of the experience overall. And the last little tidbit when it comes to the handheld experience, the actual OLED Switch is going to have much better battery life than the Switch 2. Right now, the Switch 2 is supposed to have only 2 to maybe 6 hours of battery life, which is a wide range, versus the Switch OLED gets anywhere from 6 to 9 hours of battery life, and I've been able to push this thing pretty intensely, even with something like a Pokemon Brilliant Diamond or some of those other games that I play. So I get plenty of battery life with full brightness, even pushing that OLED display, versus the Switch 2, the battery life in handheld mode, especially if you're playing some of those more task-intensive games, is going to run out on you pretty quickly. And now if we switch to dock mode, you do get one big perk, or maybe 2 big perks if you really think about it. The Switch 2 does allow for 4K upscaling onto 4K TVs when you are in dock mode, and it does keep that 120 FPS. So the games do look great. I got some experience playing them in dock mode, and overall visually they look absolutely amazing. But with the games that I play, I'm playing the Mario Karts of the world, I'm playing Pokemon, I'm not really playing those graphic intensive games, so when I do dock my Switch and we're playing with 4 people on my big TV, the 1080p upscaling from 720p, again, is going to be more than enough for most people, and that's the running theme here. I still think that the overall experience is going to be close enough where people aren't really going to care about the Switch 2, and the cost savings are going to continue to add up over time. And then the big one here for me is that the entire game library, for the most part, aside from maybe less than a handful of games, will be available for you on the Switch 1. Because at launch, there's really only 2 games, and one of them is a demo, so there's really only one Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive game, and that's going to be Mario Kart World. And now, that game was amazing when I got to play it, and I might get a little bit of FOMO in the very beginning, but after a while, Mario Kart 8 is going to be, again, more than enough. It's a very similar experience, and it still works on the Switch 1. With a couple other ones coming, like the Donkey Kong Bonanzas of the world, but even some of the games that they're working on that were, again, announced during the Switch 2 event, will have a Switch 1 counterpart that can be run on the Switch 1. So even popular games like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild or Tears of Kingdom, it'll have a Switch 2 edition, but will also have a Switch 1 variant. Civilization 7 will also run on the Switch 1, Street Fighter, Cyberpunk, Deltarune, Fortnite, all these games will still work on the Switch 1 with a counterpart to be used on the Switch 2, which will be some sort of little upgrade like being able to run on 1080p, on 4K, 120 FPS, but the experience is going to be pretty much one-to-one. And then lastly, let's talk about the big thing that Nintendo mentioned, which is going to be Game Chat. So Game Chat will be a subscription. It's going to be $20 a year for you just to be able to use that brand new button, albeit it's going to be free for a little while. I believe March 31st, 2026 will be when the paid version will start to commence, so you'll be able to try it out if you do have a Switch 2. But it's essentially just going to be video chatting, and it is going to be exclusive to the Switch 2, and let's see exactly how this is adopted over time. I know a lot of people maybe on the surface think it's cool, but won't be using it as much as they think so that is something to consider if you're huge into online gameplay, if you're huge into this idea of being able to share your screen and being able to talk to 12 people at the same time, and being able to kind of use that Nintendo camera to portray yourself on the screen, then yeah, by all means go for it, and if you think that's going to be worth the $20 a year, then you are a Switch 2 user, and you should pre-order the Switch 2. But if you're somebody who plays by themselves, somebody that plays in the dock position, somebody that plays with friends in person, that's going to be something that you'll never ever use, and it's something that I personally, outside of maybe demoing it for somebody or showing it off, I probably actually wouldn't use at all. So you should get the Switch 2. So if you want the best possible graphics and you do want to compete with an actual computer and compete with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X's of the world, then by all means get the Switch 2 because it's going to be the best experience for graphics. If you play docked 90% of the time and you want to take advantage of the 4K aspect of it all, then of course the Switch 2 is going to be for you. And if you really care about those next-gen exclusive, primarily just right now the Mario Kart World, then yes, you're going to have to ante up and pay that money for that. And also to keep in mind, the games are going to be more expensive. They go from $59.99 to $79.99 if it is a Switch 2 game. So that is another thing to consider, that over time you're going to be spending more money on those games. But if you're in the market for a new Switch, maybe you still have the OG one, and you are considering getting the Switch 2, think about the OLED Switch because you'll be saving at least $150 on launch date. You'll be saving money when it comes to the games that are played. You have pretty much the entire library of Switch games at your disposal. And if you're buying this for yourself as a casual gamer, if you're buying this for a son or a daughter or a child that maybe won't get the most out of the $500 device, then by all means, I think the Switch OLED is going to be the best purchasing decision for 95% of people. So let me know in the comment down below what you think. Are you upgrading to the Switch 2? Are you going to be pre-ordering it when it is available? Which again, right now is up in the air here in the US as to when you can pre-order it. I, for one, I'm probably going to get the Switch 2 just to try it out, but this Switch OLED has been amazing over the last few months. I've been loving using it, and at the end of the day, I still get a great experience using it, and I still recommend this Switch OLED because for the price, there really isn't much else out there that has that type of Nintendo IP. So definitely consider the Switch OLED if it's something that you are looking forward to when it comes to upgrading your Switch, and let me know in the comment down below what you think. But that'll do it for this video, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And if you want to watch more videos like this one, definitely check out one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando. Peace, everybody.